Hi, I'm Megan Bozak, and the title of my article is Women's Sports Spectatorship: An Exploration of Men's Influence. And the authors are Anne Marie Farrell, Janet S. Fink, and Sarah Fields. And the source is Journal of Sport Management, 2011. And I chose this article because as a female athlete, it appealed to me because I wanted to find out what factors influence spectatorship among both men and women in regards to women's sports. So a little background information. The authors compiled this study because there has been a limited amount of research in the viewership of women's sport. And although participation rates of women's sports has been increasing, consumption of women's sport has not seen that same rise. So Sport Business Journal reported that women made up 42% of MLB fans, 31.8% of the NBA, and 24.1% for NASCAR fans. However, they comprise only 40% of the television audience for the WNBA. The purpose of this study was to investigate this phenomenon through the voices and perspective of female fans of men's basketball who do not attend women's basketball games. So the male hegemony in sport, it is a common belief in our society that the sport world was constructed by and for the male figure. This belief is seen in historical systems of rules and regulations and not just in sports. And since sport is a social matter, social order is a very real part of the culture. The article argues that women's disempowerment in sports is something that is embedded in our society, and such the roots of the skewed social structure can be tracked back for a long time in history, so it is difficult to alter. Although we are seeing an increase in the number of girls and women participating in sport, there have not been the same results in terms of spectating women's sport. So the women's consumption of sport and previous studies have shown that there are two main motives that drive female spectators to watch the sport. These motives are social and psychological needs of the spectator. And to this point, there has not been research done in the area of gendered motives for spectating. Some research has been attempted, but there have been mixed results. There was a study done in 1995 that suggested that men score higher on measurements of self-esteem, entertainment, and group affiliation, while women scored higher on measurements of being motivated by family. And another study compiled in the early 2000s found similar results, in that women were motivated by family motives. However, a study in 2005 found that the only difference between men and women is that men scored lower on the knowledge motive. Because of this inconsistent data on the subject, it is difficult to predict what motives will be seen across different genders. And although there have been opposing results regarding women's consumption of sport between male and female spectators, consistent data has been found in examining people who attend both women's and men's sporting events. Spectators attend both gender events for similar reasons, including entertainment, achievement, and social motivation. However, one study found that women's basketball fans were more concerned with beauty and grace of the game compared to men, so it appears that different genders are attempting to fulfill different needs. So for the research questions, the study sought to fill that void through a qualitative analysis of female spectators' reasons for attending men's but not women's basketball games. The research questions examined by the authors throughout this study include: why do some female fans of men's sport choose not to attend women's sporting events? What factors exert the greatest influence on attendance decision of these non-spectators? And for the method, the setting of this study was a large Midwestern university in the United States with a rich tradition of success in both men's and women's basketball. The men's team had a postseason ban, and the women's team was coming off a record-breaking season, with many of their top players returning for the following season. So information was collected from their ticket office regarding season ticket holders including the names and contact information of both men's and women's basketball season ticket holders. And in order to participate in this study, participants must have been older than 18, have no experience attending women's basketball games in the past 5 seasons, and be current season ticket holders for the men's basketball team. So 12 women were selected for this study, and the women were interviewed by the authors of this study, lasting anywhere between 40 to 60 minutes. Interview questions were created utilizing the overall broad research questions of the study, which also heavily influenced by previous research on women's consumption of sport and motives of sport consumption. Participants were first asked questions regarding their attendance patterns at sport events. Those questions were followed up with questions that examined the subject's perceptions of women's and men's sport. Finally, the participants were asked what sport marketers could do to make attendance in women's basketball more probable. So the results, the most overwhelming theme from the interviews was that there was a large influence of men on the sport decisions of the women interviewed. And women in the study were shaped by the men in their lives. And according to those men, sport was often defined as only a men's sport. Since women's sport has a lack of media coverage, that also attributed to the more positive attitudes toward men's sport versus women's sport. So not one of the women interviewed pointed to a female influence relative to sport. Rather, many of the women were influenced by their husbands or their fathers or brothers while they were growing up. So the authors attributed this to the possibility that sports are where boys become men and the strong sense of masculinity in the sports culture. Other possible reasoning that the researchers found as to why women were so heavily influenced by men included the perception that only men's sport is important and only men really understand sports, lack of media coverage for women's sports, implications for future research, and future studies should attempt to find women who truly receive enjoyment from attending sporting events rather than merely attending to spend time with their significant others. Although all the women who took part in this study bought season tickets and indicated they enjoyed attending the games, most did not appear to be highly identified fans or fanatical about their team. It would be interesting to determine if women who were intensely and inherently interested in the team and sport would provide different perspectives. So throughout this, I learned that there are a variety of different influences, both internal and external, in examining the motives between why men and women consume sport. As a sports marketer, this research provides good information, especially for women's sports leagues. According to the research, if men have such a strong influence on a women's sport experience, perhaps more effort needs to be spent on attempting to get men to attend women's sporting events. In turn, those men would be more willing to attend games in the future, and thus influencing the women in their lives to attend as well. Thank you.